What's up everyone, my name is Mark Hawk and today we're doing a quick side-by-side with the new TomTom Bandit up against the new Garmin Virb X. Now we're going to put these cameras through a variety of tests, so sit back and we'll start playing them all in just a second, or you can use any of these quick links to jump to the section you're most interested in. Anyway, let's get to it. So we're going to start off by taking a look at what each of these cameras does best at 30 frames a second. Now before we get too deep into this video, I wanted to give a huge shout out to actually all of you that are watching and have been subscribers, because today we reached our 10,000 subscriber milestone. Now this has been a number I've been trying to reach ever since we started the channel a few years ago. These videos are a lot of hard work, and just having subscribers and positive comments and support coming in, it's a huge morale booster, because each one of these videos takes about 20 to 30 hours to put together, not including the time that we actually spend out there filming. So thanks again for being subscribers. It's a huge morale booster, and yeah, let's get back to the comparison. Now, like I said in the beginning, we're taking a look at both of these cameras at their best performance at 30 frames a second. Now, with the Garmin Virb X on the right side of your screen, that's 1920 by 1080p. And unlike the Virb XE, this is actually its max resolution. It can't do 1440p. And it's also missing a few features, and it takes a huge hit in quality compared to the XE, but we'll get into that more in another video. The TomTom Bandit will actually shoot at 2.7K at 30 frames a second, and can also go down to 1080p at 30 frames a second. However, when you switch the TomTom Bandit from 2.7K to 1080p actually looks a lot worse in quality. It's much softer. The resolution just takes a big hit in quality. Now we have both cameras here running at a wide field of view. The Garmin Virb X has a tendency to pump a little more red into the shot and crunch those values down in the white and the black values. Take a look at things like the tree, or maybe even this like really up close rock. With the Garmin Virb X, you'll notice it's very blown out. It does have very sharp edges though, because we are crunching those values. That's why we have such sharp blacks on the right side of your screen. It can actually make things like those bushes in the lower left look like they're a little crisper and have more detail, but when we zoom into 200% here, you're going to notice a lot of that detail gets very muddy and lost with the background, and it becomes very hard to separate things in the distance from things in the foreground. Like look in the lower left right now. The bush that's there, like a lot of those little branches and stuff, like we can't really tell what's in the foreground and what's in the background as easily as we can with the TomTom Bandit. That's not to say the TomTom Bandit is leaps and bounds better, but in terms of just like things like image quality and branch quality, I noticed a lot more of it in the TomTom Bandit. Now with the Bandit, we've actually switched it over to 1920 by 1080, and take a look at that quality loss, because we're going to switch back and forth here from 1080p to 2.7K on the left side of your screen. You'll notice when it goes to 2.7K, those trees pop a little more. You can see the branches a little bit better. The grass in the lower left looks a little bit better, but when we switch to 1080p, it gets much softer. So if you do go with the Bandit and you do plan on filming with it a lot, I highly suggest filming at 2.7K and then just sort of scaling it down to 1920 later on. It will definitely give you a big image quality boost. Now if you're looking for that red tint I was telling you about, take a look at the Garmin Virb X Sky. It definitely is a little bit more purple compared to the nice rich blue we're getting out of the Bandit. Both of these cameras do offer different field of views. The Garmin Virb X actually has 3. It has wide, zoom, and ultra zoom, while the TomTom Bandit only has 2 field of views, which is wide and normal. Normal is basically a medium field of view. It doesn't have sort of a really closed off 90-degree field of view like the Garmin Virb X does. Now if you're comparing quality yourself, I find times a day like golden hours, somewhere late in the evening, is a really good way to get really excellent shots with a lot of nice contrast, just to really emphasize the quality each camera is bringing to the table. It's really easy to get really nice looking shots here. Here we have like a really mundane shot, but there's a lot of interesting shadows, there's a lot of interesting light color coming in, and we can see a lot of detail and stuff happening. Look at the tire well on the Garmin Virb X. Notice those little jaggies around the wheel edge as we're doing that sort of curved surface, while on the TomTom Bandit, you know, it's not ultra sharp, but we're not getting those really weird jaggies. Now those jaggies could be from just the Virb X having a really hard time just getting that quality, or it could be because we're crunching those values, but I don't really think it's from crunching the values, because if we were crunching those whites and those blacks down really hard, we would see a lot of weird things happening in the sky. Like in the upper side of the screen here, those blue skies, when we have a lot of the similar color that kind of gradiates out into maybe a different shade of blue, when we crunch those values on some other cameras, we'll notice some weird things happening. But here, like things like the bike on the Virb X, you have a really hard time distinguishing the background from the foreground rocks. So like a lot of that bike frame just gets lost from the background rocks. While the TomTom Bandit, you can clearly tell where the bike is and where the background is much more clearly. You can just see those edges really nice. So when we originally set out to do this comparison, we were going to do a bunch of biking up at Snow Summit. However, during the time we were there, a big forest fire broke out, and San Bernardino Fire Department and CalFire were on scene to try and suppress the fires before they reached a lot of local housing. And it was really impressive and cool stuff, and we definitely got a very unique look at a bunch of stuff happening around the town. Things like this helicopter coming down, we're going to see a lot of fine particles, a lot of fast-moving objects, a lot of weird edges, and even this lake offers us a really unique look at a lot of things. Like the TomTom Bandit is bringing a lot of that sky blue into the lake, when in reality it's actually probably closer to the Virb X. It's a very muddy water. You don't really feel that blue. You see more of those greens and those reddish colors coming through the water. Now the Virb X is pumping a little more of that red channel in, and in this scenario it's actually kind of benefiting it. But look in the lower right, I keep getting this like sort of purplish hue on the Virb X every now and then in the lower left or the lower right. Now it's not a recording light, it's just this sort of purple tint that happens when certain color patterns sort of formulate on that lower part of the screen. And again, rain droplets are a huge thing for us to look at here. Now if you plan on using the Bandit or the Garmin Virb X as a sort of motor camera, or sort of a vlog camera, if you have raindrops hitting the lens, you want to know how they're going to react, how they're going to fall off of it. Now you can improve things like putting sort of anti-rain droplet material on those lenses to help out, but it's kind of a good thing just to look at overall. Now with the Virb X, you actually can attach a Bluetooth microphone, a third-party Bluetooth microphone, even if you want, to the camera, so you can have wirelessly talk to the camera itself. The TomTom Bandit offers something else, but I've yet to figure it out, but I do believe it has some of that same functionality. Now, both of these cameras do offer a form of tracking data. What I mean by that is the Virb X basically has a built-in bunch of sensors, and those sensors are recording things like GPS, rotation, G-force, and then it's saving it all to a metadata file that we can use later on to overlay on top of the footage fairly easy. We actually have a bunch of videos using the Virb XE to do all this, and this camera actually shares most of those same functions, so you can watch that and get a general idea on what you can get out of the Virb X. Now, the TomTom Bandit offers some of these same features, but there's no dedicated software to do it. It can only be done through an app, and the app is kind of limited on what you can apply over the footage, and you can't really apply it to each clip individually or turn it on and off, and the app actually builds all of the footage by itself, so it's less robust right now, but I have a feeling once that dedicated software comes out, it might be a little better, and we'll kind of revisit it back then. Take a look at that tree line back there in that last shot. You can see a lot of the smoke rising up from behind the trees, and just sort of how the trees in front of it sort of occlude it and stuff, and how it wraps around it. You can definitely see a lot more of it in the TomTom Bandit, but it feels a little softer again because we're not crunching the values as hard as the Virb X. But since our quality is so crunched, and all of our edges, like look at the tree in the middle of the screen on each camera, as it goes into the sky, I feel like we're losing a lot of that sort of fine diffused light coming around those branches. Instead, we get like these really crunchy sharp edges in the tree instead of that sort of nice soft fallout. Like not having that nice soft fallout is where we lose a lot of that edge detail, like when we were looking at the mountain bike behind the bright background before. Just the way the light was wrapping around it and the way the camera was crunching those values to kind of assume that they're the same level of white. In theory, if we had a nice dark background, it would give us a nice crisp edge, but since we can't guarantee that in every scenario, we're losing a lot of edge detail with the Virb X, and again, we have those little jaggy issues, especially in things like this power line that's kind of going across the middle of the screen here. Look at things like on the left side of your screen. See how when we have the dark background, that sign with the trees looks like it has a much sharper edge, but the Bandit just has a really nice diffuse and soft edge, and it feels a little more natural. Now again, depending on where you plan on using your camera could make a very big difference. So if you plan on doing a lot of stuff in the dirt or warm environments, that Virb X, that extra red, will actually make your shots feel very warm, while the TomTom Bandit again stays on a more neutral path. Now here we're doing a quick time lapse, and you can see with the Virb X, it's actually very crucial to lock that white balance. And generally when you're doing time lapses, it should be good point of view to lock that white balance, but most of the time I don't, and I don't have an issue like I am having with the Virb X right now. It's all over the place, but at least it's actually taking still photos and then rebuilding the time-lapse for me. The TomTom Bandit is actually shooting a 10K video, I'm sorry, not 10K, a 4K video, and then it's just a video format. It's not the individual photos, and the big deal with that is that I'm losing a lot of the quality and sort of control that I would have from taking individual photos. So things like color balance, bit depth, and stuff like that are much higher in raw photos. Now the highest frame rate you can go with the Virb X is 60 frames a second at 720p. The TomTom Bandit will actually do 120 frames a second at 720p, and you can actually slow it down quite a bit more if you're okay with 480p, but if you want to stay in the HD ballpark, this is really what we're looking at. Now you can change all of your field of view options in the slow motion modes as well on both of these cameras. So with the Bandit we could do wide or normal, with the Virb X we could do wide, medium, or narrow field of view. I'm sorry, no, wide zoom or ultra zoom. However, the Virb X does not have the lens rectification mode that we have on the XE, so there's no way to undistort the footage, which is kind of a shame. The Virb XE is $400, while the Virb X is $300. The TomTom Bandit retails for $400, and there's a bundle that's $500, which comes with a lot more mounts. That actually makes it a little more worthwhile to go with the $500 version, but that still is a really high price. Now again, on that sort of balancing of color thing we were talking about, take a look at the Bandit and look at those rocks on the right side of your screen. Even though we're supposed to be a little more neutral colored, like I've been saying throughout this video, those rocks have a very green tint to them. But with the Virb XE, again, that scenario on where you bring your camera more often might play out because those rocks are really nice and warm, but they're also not... I don't know, they're not super beautiful. I think the overall balance in colors on both of these cameras in this situation could be much better, especially compared to the Hero 4 Silver, which we were filming at the same time as this video. There'll actually be a link to it at the end of this video. You can actually check out a lot of these same shots with these two cameras compared up against the Hero 4 Silver. The Bandit does do a really nice job, though, of dealing with really hot spots. It's really not overexposing that sun, and not that I think the Virb X is doing anything wrong, it's just the TomTom Bandit kind of looks like it has like maybe an ND filter on top of it. That way we don't have to blow out the sun and we still have a lot of this detail here. The road detail on the Bandit is great, while the Garmin Virb X, that road detail was a little bit muddy and really not as clean as it could be. Now we're going into our low light section of this, and both of these cameras will do very different things. You can see right off the bat, the Bandit is just, you know, it's very blue, which is kind of weird because before we were kind of a more natural color base. The Virb X definitely feels a little bit brighter, and again, maybe it's because we feel like we have that ND filter on the front of the lens, but the lens isn't obstructed with any type of coating or anything like that. It's just how it's handling those different type of settings. Like, you know, we're looking straight in the sun, so the camera's going to interpret that it's got to go down a little bit, that way we have a nice balanced image. And just how each camera handles these like tough situations, because we're throwing these cameras at a bunch of different elements, and I think this shot is a really good example when we go to 100%. Just like look at that detail in the building on the right and how much those value gets crunched. Now this next section we're going to do audio, so I'm going to go quiet here, but just get ready to adjust your volume. Anyway guys, right now we're going to be doing a sound test between these two cameras, so we're going to play some music here, and we're also going to use the sound of my voice just to determine how the quality is between these two cameras. So let's get to it.
Left to crack open, I couldn't ignore the fact possibility of acting open this insanity that we still could be, but we're stuck.
What we've done real quick is we've opened up the door of the Garmin Virb X. Now, in most scenarios you won't have the door open, but since it is a submerged case, it's going to muffle that audio quite a bit. So this is the true potential of it. Even though most scenarios will have the door closed, let's just test it out. So you probably had a really hard time in that last section hearing anything I was saying out of the cameras. Now the reason why I didn't adjust either of those cameras is because I wanted to leave it just as the quality that we got in is what I'm representing to you guys. Now unfortunately I think both of the audio quality on both of those cameras is pretty poor, and you can see even with the Virb X and having the door open, it didn't really make a huge difference in audio quality. Now both of these cameras can accept external microphones, but just looking at just the internal microphones, they're kind of not the greatest. We're taking a look here at nighttime settings. Now both these cameras don't really have any settings that we can really adjust for night in terms of video, but it is important to note that the Virb X does appear to have some type of degraining feature. That way your image is losing a lot of that grain that we're seeing in the Bandit, while the Bandit is trying to overcompensate for the low light by boosting the grain up. Now the denoising thing is great, but unfortunately it's going to make our footage a little bit softer. So if we wanted to use this as a dash cam, that's something to keep in mind, because it might make things like like license plates impossible to read. Now both of these cameras do have really impressive image sensors, and we're actually going to provide you with a bunch of the raw photos so that you can look at them on your end, because I can show you the photos on screen, but it doesn't really do justice to how large these photos are. Now the Virb X has a 12 megapixel image sensor at a resolution of 4000 by 3000, so a 4:3 aspect ratio, and the TomTom Bandit has a very impressive 16 megapixel image sensor at a resolution of 4656 by 3492. Now in these photos, the Virb X, the image quality takes a huge quality improvement over the videos compared to the photos we're taking. The photos just much more impressive. It has some of the same color sort of techniques that the original video has, but when it comes to quality, like that building on the lower right before we saw it was like really jaggy and kind of poor, while the photo quality of it looks really nice, and so does the low light. And while the low quality with the Virb X might not have been impressive, its auto shutter technique for when it's in low light is really good. So you can take photos in low light, it'll automatically keep the shutter open just a little bit longer, so your photo quality is much nicer in low light. And the Virb X does feature tactile buttons, so we can actually just press one button for their shutter or flip a switch forward for video, which is really nice. The TomTom Bandit has a button in the back, which I'm not a huge fan of, because as soon as you press it, it actually tilts the camera forward a little bit just because of the pressure you have to put on it. Anyway, that's going to wrap up our quick side-by-side with the new TomTom Bandit up against the Garmin Virb X. Now, if you want to see those raw photos for yourself and maybe a few video clips, check out the more information section below this video, and be sure to leave your questions and comments in the field below. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe. It helps me out immensely. And if you're feeling super generous, head on over to our Patreon page. It's going to be so much more important in the next few weeks here that I get a little more support, because we're going to have some really big changes on, but we're going to go into that in a few weeks when I can actually talk about that. But head on over there, leave me a donation. It's going to be immensely more helpful from here on out. Again, we have a bunch of other videos here, and if you can't really afford to throw anything in, be sure to share these videos. Again, support like that helps me out way more than you guys imagine. Just the exposure alone is something I can't really pay for. So anyway, I'm Mark Hawkcam. It's been a pleasure, and again, thanks for the 10,000 milestone. Totally stoked, and yeah, I'm just rambling now. So anyway, have a good one, and I'll see you all out there. Take care, everyone.